Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Sam. I'm just going to be making a series of videos on kind of the reflections of on the diary of a revert brother in the UK, as it were. Because I got married recently. Alhamdulillah, I got married. She's a very, very good wife, mashallah, already. At the moment, anyway. We've only been married 2 months, so it's still sururu shahrin at the moment. I know that there are a lot of struggles that a lot of revert brothers like myself have in the UK. Obviously, there are certain questions to do with how does it change your identity, how do we sort of shape this British Islam, and questions like this as well. And since I've been married, especially, I've realised that there are a lot of things I've sort of encountered and things that I'd just like to share my reflections on a little bit. But in this first video, I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit, let you guys know who I am, what sort of perspective I'm going to be speaking from, and just some of the experiences that I've had since I've been a Muslim. So Bismillah, to begin, I grew up in Cornwall, in the countryside in Cornwall. Born into a sort of established middle class, white British family. We weren't particularly religious. I think most people in the UK are kind of born into some sort of vague Protestant Christian background, and we know that we're Christians, but it's not our reference point. Like, it doesn't influence our lives so much. But I went to a school called the Roseland School in Cornwall, which is very small. I grew up in a fisherman's village called Goranhaven in Cornwall, which is also very small, very sort of insular, very sort of homogenous, very white. I went to a college called Truro College, and that was really where I first started to interact with these ideas of where do we come from, what are we doing in this world, where are we going after we die, what are we supposed to be doing here, what is our influence on the rest of the world as we exist as human beings. And when I did study of religions, I studied all sorts of world religions, studied Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, Taoism, Zoroastrianism, and eventually you came to Islam. And I mean, at first, I think talking to other revert brothers as well, one of the first things that really hits us is how even if we've never met Muslims in our life, like I'd never met a Muslim in my life when I started learning about Islam, and I'd never met a Muslim in my life when I knew that I wanted to become a Muslim even, and it really sort of struck me how our misconceptions are so different to the reality, and how the things that are focused on in the media or other places where we might get our information from, whether it's completely passively, we might just hear a report about something going on in Palestine or in Syria and form our own opinions sort of subconsciously a lot of the time. And when I learnt about things like that, there are real bridges between what I knew and Islam, like that Muslims actually believe in Jesus, Isa alayhi salam. And at first I wasn't really interested in becoming a Muslim. I wasn't looking for a new religion or anything in particular. I was just from a very sort of liberal background generally. As I said, my parents weren't really religious. Sort of the attitude was just kind of, well, if it feels good, then do it. There's this idea of just being like a good human rather than getting your morals from a religion or from any other sort of established reference point. But so as I sort of carried on studying Islam, it was just sort of like me being a white English person and me studying these people who are a bit different, and they have an interesting religion that is very sort of holistic, includes different aspects of your life. But that changed completely when my study of religions lecturer gave us an assignment. She sent us a link to Quran Explorer and just said, like, your assignment for today is listen to a few surahs of the Quran and then think about how it might make a Muslim feel. When you're actually listening to it, think about how it might make a Muslim feel. And as I did, I was jotting down things like emotional, spiritual, and then as I sat and I was listening to Surah Al-Baqarah, a chapter called The Cow, which is the second chapter of the Quran, those of you who may not be Muslims and may not know. And it got to a point where I just put my pen down and I was just listening to it. And I felt these things. Like, it wasn't even an assignment anymore, it was me just thinking about I didn't even understand it. Like, didn't understand any Arabic, but that was really where the transition between learning about Islam and sort of feeling Islam really came in. And when I sort of started to feel a personal relationship with Islam and actually sort of feel part of it in a way, even though I'd never met a Muslim in my life. So I started to talk to my family about it. I tried to encourage my family to listen to the Quran just to see what they think, see if like I was going crazy or something, so from then on, most days after school, after college, I'd come home, I'd sit down at my desk to do some studying and stuff, and I'd end up just listening to the Quran for hours. Before I'd even considered becoming a Muslim, I'd memorised about 10 pages of Surah Al-Baqarah. I just fell in love with this. Like, I fell in love with the way the Arabic language sounds. I fell in love with the message when I read it in English. I fell in love with how there were certain rhyme patterns with things that were linked when I read the English version of the Quran as well. And so, with my family, we were talking to my family about it and stuff. It was very gradual. Like, before I actually took my shahada and became a Muslim in a mosque, my family thought I'd been Muslim for months by that point, because I talked about it so much, talked about becoming a Muslim so much. Excuse me. And it came to a point when I was 17. I would have been 16 when I started learning about Islam. When I started my A-levels, would have been about 17 when I actually found out there was a mosque. I'd consider myself a Muslim. I taught myself to pray just from YouTube videos and stuff. When I actually found out there was a mosque about an hour drive away from me in Cornwall. So I got in my car, I went there, and there was an Egyptian man outside. And obviously I'd never met a Muslim before, so the really common greeting that we use, Assalamu alaikum, to someone, I'd never actually said to someone. I'd only ever said it when I'd been praying. So I've been rehearsing it in the car. I was like, I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna say Assalamu alaikum, and he's gonna say wa alaikum salam or something, and then I'm gonna have to remember to say Alhamdulillah, I'm very well. I'm gonna have to remember to say MashaAllah and stuff like that. So I've been rehearsing these things in the car, and then when I got there, there was a man called Mustafa who was there, and he was just so happy. You can imagine this lost guy who's 16, 17 years old in Cornwall turns up to this mosque. And so I started going there, started actually reading the Quran to a teacher, and then as I started to learn Arabic more and learn the Quran more, decided that I wanted to do my degree in Arabic and Islamic studies. So I applied to go to SOAS, University in London, and I got accepted. Moved to London when I was 18. Met a lot of brothers in London, as you would. And obviously I'd never met a Muslim my age before, but by that point I'd met some Muslims who were older people, because at our mosque in Cornwall, and now there are a lot of Revert brothers now, alhamdulillah, a lot of people are starting to embrace Islam in Cornwall, but the majority of the Muslims there are Bangladeshis who went there to go and open restaurants and stuff like that. So I rock up in King's Cross to start uni. I'm from the countryside. I've never really been to a big city or anything. And I actually meet brothers who are on the deen, young people who are my age who I can relate to, and people who had similar struggles to me, people who, even though they were born in Muslim families, sometimes they actually had less Islamic influences than me. So, and on the other end of the spectrum, I met Muslims who called themselves Muslims and had names like Muhammad, but had very little relationship with their deen, which was really confusing for me, as you can imagine. The only real Muslims that I had met and spoke to or had heard of or had learnt from were either the prophets in the Quran, or these older gentlemen who I'd met at the masjid and had a chat to when I'd gone on Jum'ah and stuff like that. So at university, in my third year, I went to Palestine to study Arabic for a year, and I felt like I was practicing, I felt like I was praying my salah, making an effort to memorise the Quran, but then when I went to Palestine, I sort of realised how important home and family and stuff were to me. I wanted to start thinking about getting married. Obviously got to an age, I was sort of 20 years old, 21 years old, you're thinking about getting married. So in Palestine, had the opportunity to really sort of up level my Arabic, start really speaking Arabic to a lot of people on a regular basis, learning Amiyya, whilst at university using Fusha, like formal Arabic a lot as well. And came a long way in my journey. I was living with a brother as well who was very on the deen as well, and he was a really good influence on me, both of us getting each other up for Fajr when we were in Palestine. And we went to Masjid al-Aqsa 3 times together as well, prayed Jum'ah, prayed Fajr there. And that was a real ni'mah, like that was a real blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give me that iman boost, and to put me in an environment where, even though you don't necessarily feel safe all the time when you're living in Nablus in the West Bank, you do feel like you have iman. You're in an environment of people who are very familiar with conflict, and most of them even familiar with death and the reality that the Muslims are in big trouble. The Muslims at the moment are in a position where we're not the superpower anymore, like the Muslims were at one point in history. And that was really good for my iman and my journey to sort of be in a different environment like that. When I came back from Palestine, after having learned Arabic and studied more of the Quran and met Muslims from other cultures and realised the unity that we actually have between other cultures, I was invited by a da'wah team in Uganda to go to Uganda. And I went to Uganda. I went to some Muslim girls' schools and gave da'wah and taught some English and taught some Arabic at those schools. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me with 13 shahadas. I had 13 people embrace Islam with me when I was there giving da'wah, just for the relatively short time that I was there. And that sort of increased like my belief even more, how beautiful it is that the Muslims are so united, actually. That even though in the media you see sort of division between the Muslims, actually when I'd been to Palestine and I'd met all of these Muslims, and I'd been to Uganda and I'd met all of these Muslims, that we believe exactly the same thing. Actually, among 99.9% of the Muslims, we pray in the same masajid. We don't have any like aggressive disagreements, even if we have differences in opinion in terms of fiqh and rulings and stuff. And that amazed me, that you have these 3 different cultures. Like myself, like I'm from a fisherman's village in Cornwall. Like, only a black person till I was about 20, but I can rock up in Uganda and just be welcomed by these people and love them, and they love me and welcome me, and likewise in Palestine. When I came back from Uganda, I started my final year at university. Alhamdulillah, I met the woman who has become my wife now, alhamdulillah, when I was in my final year at university. And that's another journey in itself, which I'm going to do another subsequent video on, inshallah, on sort of what it's like being a white British Muslim and marrying a Muslim girl from another culture. I'm going to do another video on that. I think that'll be my next video, inshallah. And alhamdulillah, I graduated in July of this year, of 2015. And after that, I've started on the Teach First programme. I'm currently a primary school teacher living in London. I teach year 4. And that's pretty much how my journey has been, really. That's pretty much each of the stages that have gone on in my journey. And constantly throughout it, there's been reflections on how do you, like, what does it mean for your culture and your identity to be a Muslim? Like, how does that change the dynamic with your family? How does that change the dynamic with your friends that you would have had before? How do you get into the habit of leaving things that you might have used to do, things that are forbidden in Islam that you used to do before Islam? And how does it change your reference points completely? Like previously, when you had a big decision to make, or you had like moral dilemmas or something, a lot of the time, unless we have a structured religion, we actually don't know where we get our information from to make decisions like that. You know, a lot of the time it's literally based on, like I remember at school when I had to make decisions, it was often to do with films. Like if I'd seen a similar thing in a film, I'd think about what happened. But changing that sort of reference point to being the Quran and the example of our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like that transition is something that I'll talk about a little bit as well, because I think there are a lot of Revert brothers and sisters out there who don't really know how that works, how it works to go from being this white secular liberal person living in the UK to being a Muslim but maintaining the culture that you had before. So my next video, inshallah, I hope you watch it, is about marrying a non-Muslim, marrying a Muslim, astaghfirullah, marrying a Muslim girl, and sort of what implications that has for your culture and how you sort of maintain an identity that you're comfortable in whilst doing that. So I'm sure there are lots of things that I've missed out in this video. I mean, in a 15-minute video, there's no way that I can include absolutely everything and every struggle that happened along the way. But that's sort of that's the skeleton of what happened. If you're interested in completing the body, that was my journey to Islam, then ask me some questions, get in contact in the comments below, ask some questions and I'll hopefully answer them. Yeah, so that's it. Look forward to my next video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.